was a suggestion at TPN that smaller forwarders and SMEs are increasingly under pressure, and the days of these of canny smaller players getting similar rates to the big, huge BCOs were sort of gone. Are the carriers going to be looking back to these guys now then if they're struggling to get the rates they want?
Yeah, I mean, anytime the market softens, the NVOs get a little bit more of a warm shoulder from the carriers versus a cold shoulder. But that being said, I do think that we are seeing more of a tiered level in our industry now, where if you're a certain size and you manage and carry a certain level of containers, that puts you in this tier. And then, it drops from there, like I said, versus years ago in the business where a rate was a rate. And, if you were smart enough to know the market and get a lot of offers, you could gain a West Coast rate or an East Coast rate similar to some of the biggest importers. The carriers are just more selective, not only just the size of their customer, but I think the how knowledgeable you're dealing with a very large importer, a large BCO. They not only move a lot of freight, but they move it with a certain amount of skill and understanding for what they need on a week to week basis, from which port to which port. And they're easier for the carriers to deal with. Where the smaller you get as a carrier, that you're either dealing with somebody that's not as consistent with their shipping or may change more often. Their rollovers may be more often. Their no-shows may be more often. So, some of it is to be understood that somebody moving 200,000 containers probably should pay a little bit different than somebody that moves 2,000 containers. But that being said, it's more important for the smaller NVOs and the smaller importers to be a good steward to their carrier partners, to show up when they say they're going to show up, know their business well, be able to put it together with the strings and the sailing schedules, and work well with the carriers versus just demanding a low rate and then walking away and thinking that's all that's important in their contracts.
If you're maybe an SME shipper in the States or something, is this managing this tender period? Is this about balancing minimum quantity commitments, while maybe maintaining some spot market flexibility, maybe trying to avoid peak season surcharges and getting something in that contract on visibility and performance?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I would, as a smaller importer, I always say this. I do think that you're better off working with an NVO. If I could give importers any advice right now, it would be do everything you can to make sure that you've got a decent amount of your business spread across all the alliances. Always important, just in case something really if Gemini if it's not operating to the efficiencies that they claim, and then, depending on your volume, really limit the number of vendors you're going to work with, because it's easier for a forwarder or a carrier to wrap themselves around you having, weekly business, regular that they can count on. So yes, if you're working with a forwarder, be prepared to give them very strong forecasts. We're going to get into this with the tariffs. A lot is going to change. So at least be transparent about that. And I think in this market, it actually will benefit the importer to possibly have more of a hybrid model where some of their volume is locked into a named account rate, but some of that is free to float on the spot market, because that may end up being the better deal. And it will allow you that flexibility that you might need if you're changing suppliers because of tariffs or what have you.